I didn't recognize the woman in the glass that morning, hair undone, bare feet on cool limestone, coffee cooling on the railing. But I recognized the chime, the doorbell. The same pitch and pause I had silenced from my life 15 years ago now pressed itself into the bones of my clifftop home in Malibu, a house of sun and wind and glass I swore would never hear that sound. I padded to the console in my foyer, thumbed the security feed, and there they were at the gate. 5 figures arranged in a crooked line, as if proximity to one another could make them look more like a family and less like a plea. My father, older, compact shoulders folded inward the way paper does when it's been refolded too many times. My mother, pearls even now, lips pressed so tight the color had fled. My brother, Nathan, soft at the middle, ring light of his phone still glowing in his hand. My sister, Lila, perfect as ever in traveling neutrals, her 2 kids blinking in the California sun. And desperation mixing on their faces like oil and water. It would have been cinematic to let them wait on that curb until dusk, turn back down the canyon to whatever rented minivan had shuttled them here from the airport. But curiosity is a stubborn animal. I pressed the intercom. "Can I help you?" My mother leaned close to the speaker as if proximity meant permission. "Arya, it's us. We were hoping to talk." Arya. Not sweetheart or honey, just my name pronounced like she'd practiced not adding anything to it. I should have cut the line. Instead, I thumbed the gate open and watched the iron arms concede them entry. "My name is Arya Bennett. I'm 38. I run a cybersecurity company I built from nothing and live in a house I bought with the revenue from problems nobody knew how to solve until I did. And still, as the people who taught me the precise shape of absence walked up my front steps, I felt 15 again, air trapped high in my chest, palms damp, the old muscle memory of making myself small in rooms built for other people's largeness. I didn't hug them when I opened the door. I didn't let them pretend away the years. I only stepped aside and pointed them into a living room that looks over the Pacific the way an old friend looks over your shoulder to make sure you made it home. "Coffee?" I asked. "Yes, please," my mother said, already scanning the art, counting the zeros in her mind. While the espresso machine did its slow hiss, I let my pulse settle and gave myself permission to be deliberate. I had dreamed this moment 1,000 different ways, but dreaming and doing are different muscles. You can't rehearse the tremor in your own hands. By the time I returned with a tray, porcelain cups, the good set my assistant insists I use for board members because details matter, they'd arranged themselves with the same vague geometry as always. My father dead center, my mother turned 3/4 toward him, my brother loosely orbiting, my sister perched at the edge as if the furniture might stain her. The kids, Maya and Theo, I'd learn, stood at the window, their breath mapping temporary islands on glass. "It's beautiful here," Lila said at last, careful. "It is," I agreed, and didn't fill the silence. You learn in business that the person who breaks the silence first is often the person who loses the ground. We saw the article, my father began, spinning the wedding ring he'd never taken off even after he'd begun taking so much else away. The profile about your gawa. In the well, everywhere. They'd seen the cover of Fortune from the week before, me on a low concrete bench in my garden, olive trees at my back, the headline blaring the 2 words that had changed my life twice, Quantalock soars. "You look happy," my mother offered, and even she winced at how thin it sounded. "What brings you here?" I asked, because sometimes questions are the only boundaries that hold. "We want to reconnect," my mother said, then rushed the rest. "And to ask for some advice." There it was. Not apology. Not "I'm sorry we made you invisible." Advice. The respectable cousin of help. I set my cup down. "Let's start with reconnecting." Advice can wait. Nathan cleared his throat. "We did what we thought was best back then." I let his words hang until they sagged. "Did you?" "Arya," my father said gently, warning in the softness. "We didn't ask to, no," I said. "You didn't. I'm not cruel. I'm also not the girl who swallowed discomfort to protect other people's feelings anymore." So I told them we would talk. Then I told them we would talk after I spoke. And then I spoke. I grew up in Parma, a suburb outside Cleveland where backyards are rectangles and expectations are squares. My father, Howard, was an engineer who remained an engineer because he liked rules that didn't move when you pushed them. My mother, Marjorie, taught third graders to spell and draw proper clock hands and sing the presidents in order. We lived in a 2-story colonial with vinyl siding and a maple that bled helicopters every May. The dog, there is always a dog in these stories, was named Scout and liked everyone but me, which felt fair at the time. There were 3 of us kids. Nathan, 7 years older, quarterback, prom king, the boy whose name was already written in gym banners before he even earned them. Lila, 5 years older, cheekbones like geometry and fingers that learned Chopin before they learned grace. And me. I did my homework without being asked, liked books more than parties, and thought computers were puzzles you could solve with the right questions. I was the reliable one, which is mother speak for we don't think about you because we don't have to. On my 10th birthday, there was supposed to be a backyard picnic with blue cupcakes I'd begged to make myself. The morning of, my mother's phone rang. Nathan's game had been bumped to noon. Change of plans, she said, as if parties moved like weather. We all need to show up big for your brother. I told her I'd invited 8 girls from school, that the frosting was already cooling in glass bowls on the counter. Life doesn't accommodate everyone, my father said, taking his Brown's cap from the hook by the door. Be a team player. We went to the game. We cheered for a boy who did not glance at the section where his family had unfurled itself like a banner. We went home to foil over cold pizza. No cupcakes, no candles. No happy birthday song stuck between 2 adults' teeth. The phrase family first started living in our house that day like an extra person we didn't talk about but always fed. By high school, I understood the architecture of our house. Applause poured toward the oldest son, admiration toward the daughter who made an entrance, expectation toward me. I didn't fight it, I used it. If no one is watching, you can quietly become dangerous. I stacked AP courses, captained the math team, crashed the school's ancient network one afternoon just to prove I could, then wrote the apology email from a teacher's login so no one would get in trouble. I shelved books at the Parma Snow branch and learned to smell the difference between a life someone loved and one they endured by the spine of what they returned. When the acceptance letters came Cornell, Carnegie Mellon, Caltech, I opened them alone on the stoop because hope looks less foolish in good light. My father said the schools were far and the cost was alarming. My mother said she worried places like that changed girls in ways they couldn't unchange. Lila asked if I'd pack a winter coat that wasn't embarrassing. Nathan asked me to help edit his grad school essay. I picked Cornell because the financial aid was generous, the CS labs stayed open past midnight, and the hills outside the engineering quad were honest about the way they'd make your legs ache. I learned C and Python and the art of being simultaneously invisible and indispensable. I learned how to sleep in other people's code. I learned to move through rooms full of men like a person who is supposed to be there. And then my grandmother died. If you need to truly understand a family's geometry, watch them sit at a funeral. My mother's mother, Ada Rowan, was the only person who ever looked at me like I was an answer, not a question. She was a nurse, the daughter of factory workers who didn't have the privilege of theory. She made pies that flaked and burned the bottom of her thumb on every one and never complained. She kept a drawer in her small house for my notebooks and war readers hanging from a chain like jewelry. Your mind is a blade, she would say when I stayed up late in her living room to build a cipher just to see if I could. Be careful what you cut, and don't let anyone dull you. She died of a stroke one late spring morning. The world pinched. We gathered in my parents' living room after the service, that stifling arrangement of chairs nobody actually sits in except on days like that. The lawyer arrived with envelopes and a little leather folder. Ada's small house went to my mother. Her car, the one with the rosary, looped around the rear view, went to Nathan. Her pearls to Lila. And to me, an emerald locket that had belonged to her mother, and a check for $7,500. Its symbolism, my mother said before I could even lift the envelope's flap. Your grandmother always did like gestures. What she meant was, why not more? What I meant, though I didn't say it because grief makes fools of us all, was, this is exactly right. Ada knew what I would refuse to sell. She knew what number would buy 3 months of breathing while I figured out how to stand upright in my own life. She knew what would pierce and what would heal. My father, who rarely let emotion be the subject of anything, went red-faced and loud. Ridiculous, he said, and the lawyer looked at the carpet. Ada always treated Arya like some kind of project, and for what? For loving me? I asked, voice unsteady. That's when he said the sentence that rearranged the furniture of my brain. We took you in when nobody else would. The least you could be is grateful. The room went still in that way you can feel under your skin. What are you talking about? I asked. My mother put her hand on the lawyer's arm as if to pause him in time. Howard, she said quietly, but it was too late for another secret. You were two, my father continued, jaw set. My sister couldn't keep you. No father named on the certificate. No one stepped up. We did. We gave you a home, clothes, school. And this is how you repay us? By using a funeral as an excuse to make everything about you. If you've ever had the word you use for yourself redefined by someone else's mouth, you know the sensation. The past goes gelatinous. Every memory becomes an interrogation room. I saw my whole childhood through a pane of new glass. The way my mother said, we expect, as if gratitude was a performance I kept flubbing. The way my father's patience was a ledger. The way Ada was the only person who didn't treat love like a loan. I didn't get angry. I got clear. So it was charity, I said. And now the account is due. No one owes you anything, Lila snapped. Chin set the way it gets when she's making a point she knows will win. Do you know how many kids would have killed for the life you had? You should be thanking us every day. You should be mealing. The lawyer coughed into his sleeve. My mother looked at the emerald locket like maybe it had always belonged to the wrong neck. Nathan said nothing, and I understood at last what role I'd been meant to play and why I'd never quite fit it. I left. I took the locket, the check, the car keys I'd bought with work-study money, and whatever parts of myself I could fit in a duffel, and I drove until the Ohio Turnpike felt like a bad dream you only remember in daylight. I landed in Seattle because it rained enough to make the world feel the way my chest did, fogged and raw, and because the apartments near Lake City were cheap if you didn't mind the sound of traffic threading through your sleep. The $7,500 Ada left me became first month's rent, a used ThinkPad, and a deposit on a room with a window that overlooked a brick wall like a patient friend. By day, I answered tickets at a tiny software company where the bathroom door didn't quite close, and the servers were stacked beside the break room fridge because the rent was cheaper if we pretended the wiring wasn't an issue. Password reset became a religion. The phrase, "Have you tried turning it off and back on?" became a lullaby. I wasn't learning what I loved, but I was learning how companies behave when nobody knows your name yet. At night, I coded. I taught myself Rust because it was quiet, Go because it didn't flinch, the inner workings of WebAuth, and because passwords were the past, and I wanted to build the future. I cobbled together a personal research project that would become the spine of my career, continuous identity. An invisible layer that studies the way you move through your device and uses 1,000 microbehaviors to know you the way a friend knows your silhouette from down the block. I ate boxed mac and carrots. I walked instead of bust. I cut my own hair with online tutorials and prayer. I kept the locket on a small dish by my computer and touched it when I got a compile error at 3:17 a.m., like maybe it was a talisman that believed in me. The turning point was a free lecture at the public library downtown, Emergent Threats and the Everyday Web, given by a professor from the University of Washington named Meena Patel. She was precise and funny and the kind of brilliant that makes you want to be near it even if you don't have a question. I had a question. I waited until the line thinned and then asked her whether anyone was taking typing cadence seriously as a two-factor fallback for non-visual interfaces. She looked up, interested. That's very specific. I've been building a model, I blurted, and immediately wanted to swallow the words because girls like me are taught not to get caught wanting things. It's rough. Bring it to the campus hackathon next month, she said. Prove it. We won second place. The team I'd fallen into by luck and coffee brought a half-working prototype, and I stitched a missing piece on a cafeteria table while a volunteer slid a granola bar in my peripheral vision like wildlife in a national park. After the awards, Meena put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're the kind who sees flaws as maps. That's rare. Don't sell it to the first person who asks nicely." The first person who asked nicely was a man named Evan Park, who sat at the far end of the bar where I picked up a weekend shift pouring IPAs for the Fleece Fest crowd. He came back 3 Fridays in a row, asked sharper questions each time, and finally said, "Send me your deck. If you don't have one, send me your repo. If you don't want to send either, tell me what you need to quit this job and build the thing the way it deserves." 2 weeks later, he wired me $180,000 with the unglamorous note, "First check, go." I cried in the supply closet and then started a Delaware C Corp with a name I scribbled on a legal pad at 2 a.m. and almost changed the next morning before deciding that maybe the best names are the ones you grow into. Quantiluck. The first year tried to kill me in every way a dream knows. I slept on a stained couch in a sublet office near Pioneer Square, ate whatever was free, and learned how to bench press disappointment. My first hire was a 19-year-old dropout with a mind like Velcro and a jaw that set when anyone told her that's not how we do it here. My second hire was a test engineer who treated breaking things like poetry. My third was a lawyer because I am not foolish. We shipped a private beta that got a polite write-up on a mid-tier tech blog and a furious email from a password manager CEO who told me I didn't understand humans. A dentist in Boise used our SDK and sent a box of candies afterward with a note that said, "My staff stopped taping passwords under the keyboard. You're a witch." 3 months later, a regional bank called and asked if we could plug into their auth layer. 6 months after that, a multinational asked to fly out their team because apparently a woman with an idea they hadn't thought of could exist. When Mina visited our shoebox office and saw 6 laptops, 4 plants, 2 sleeping bags, and 23 whiteboard sketches of the same architecture diagram, she knelt to plug in a power strip and said, "You're building a thing that will outlast the people who doubted you." I didn't realize I was crying until she reached for the tissue box and then for my hand. We grew. Slowly at first, as if the world wanted to see if I'd flinch, then all at once. A Fortune 500 license. A government pilot I can't talk about. Then a consortium of credit unions who came with skepticism and left with a signed MOU and the kind of handshake that's not performative. We moved offices. We learned how to hire people who were nothing like us and then trust them with the most precious thing we had, the work. On our 3rd birthday, our revenue line outpaced my ability to metabolize it. On our 5th, Quantiluck was quietly valued at 8 figures and noisily profiled by anyone who had ever written the words "girl boss" and regretted it. On our 8th, we filed an S1. I rang a bell not because bells matter, but because pictures do to the people who've never met you but want to see if they should believe. Every milestone came with the same quiet ritual. I held Ada's locket and whispered thank you into a room that only I inhabited. Because a good inheritance is not money, it's the belief that when you step off a cliff you might fall into flight. You can build a company that cracks a market and still come home to the quiet knowledge that no one is waiting to ask how your day was. So I built a house for that quiet and gave it windows as big as forgiveness. The Malibu place wasn't about marble or views. It was about making a geography for a life I picked, not one I performed. There's a library wing because the girl who hid in stacks deserved a palace. There's a workshop because my hands like to remember they're good for more than keyboards. There's an olive grove because patience needs practice. There's a bench under a pepper tree with a small brass plate that reads ADA Rowan because names deserve places to land. I built a life that did not require my past to sign off on it. And then my past rang my doorbell. "We could use your guidance," my father said, words careful as he set his cup down. "And possibly your participation." Participation, I repeated the way you repeat an unfamiliar dish when a waiter offers it to make sure you heard correctly. "In what?" He glanced at my mother, who looked at Nathan, who looked at his shoes. "Our freight brokerage went under last year," my father said finally. "Bad timing, worse rates. We're trying to restart. With the right capital infusion, 2.3 million, give or take, we could be back on our feet in a quarter. And your ask," I said, "is that I provide the infusion." "Loan," my mother said quickly, "with interest. And we wondered if it made sense for you to put a portion of your shares, just a small percentage, into a family trust. To protect the well, to keep assets in the family. Keep. Family. The words tasted metallic even in my own mouth. Lila tucked a hair behind her ear. Think of the kids, she added, nodding toward Maya and Theo in a move so practiced it should have come with choreography. It would change the whole trajectory of their lives. I stood because sitting felt like surrender and crossed to the built-in cabinet where I keep the albums I make when I need to remind myself my memory is not an unreliable narrator. I brought one back. Leather, heavy, the color of strong tea. We can talk about money, I said, after we talk about history. Lila made a sound that might have been a laugh. You keep scrapbooks? Receipts, I corrected, and laid the album on the table. First page, a printout of a Facebook post from 15 years ago. Thanksgiving. My parents' dining room table sagging under food. My name nowhere. The caption, so grateful to have everyone under one roof. Second page, Christmas that same year. Everyone in matching pajamas my mother would die before wearing if the cameras weren't out. Traditions, the caption read. Page after page I turned, and page after page my parents' expressions cratered. New Year's at Lake Erie. Nathan's wedding. Lila's baby shower. My mother's 60th. Best family ever, one caption proclaimed, and I had circled it in red the night I printed it because sometimes ink is the only way to pin a lie to the page. Why do you have these? Nathan asked, not hostile, just bewildered. Because people who erase you once will try to do it again, I said. I learned to keep my own archive. I closed the album and opened my laptop. I didn't flinch as I read an email my father sent 12 Decembers ago in response to a holiday card I mailed to a house that never answered the door. Arya, I read aloud, for the sake of everyone's peace, please refrain from contacting family members. We've moved on. We ask that you respect our privacy. I clicked to another. A text Lila sent to a friend, accidentally adding my old number 3 years after that. Mom is obsessed with some article about Aria's company. Like money makes you interesting if you were weird growing up. Lila closed her eyes. I was angry that day, she said. It was ugly. It was honest, I said, which is more than I've ever gotten at this table. And now, my father said, voice aging 10 years in a sentence. What do you want, Arya? Punishment? We can apologize. We can tell you we were wrong. His gaze flicked to the window. We can mean it. Apology matters. It's not a bandage for every wound, but it keeps you from bleeding out. Even so, what I wanted wasn't an apology. It was a shift in gravity. I don't want your money, I said. I don't want your business. I don't want shares parceled into a trust that pretends we share something besides history. I don't want to be the person you only call when your bank apps stop opening. My mother started to cry, a thing she did rarely and therefore strategically. Arya, please. We made mistakes. We should have told you about your adoption differently. You should have loved me without a contract, I said, gently. And when you realized you couldn't, you should have let me go without pretending I'd done the leaving. They all looked at the floor at the same time. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so sad. I turned to the kids. Hi, I'm Arya. I make the security stuff your mom's phone uses when it unlocks even though she didn't type anything. I didn't get to be your aunt before now. That's not your fault. If you ever want to come plant tomatoes in my garden or ask me what classes you should take that don't feel like a waste of oxygen, I'm around. Theo's eyes flicked to his mother's and then to me. Do you have snacks? He whispered, because children always cut to the right question. I have a drawer that would make your dentist cry, I said, and saw the first glint of a smile. Then I turned back to the adults. I won't be financing your brokerage, I said. I won't be allocating shares. But I will do 2 things. I'll set up 529 plans for Maya and Theo and fund them in full. I'll put an airtight trustee in place that isn't you, and those funds will be used for education-only college, trade school, the thing they love that builds a life. And I will take your calls if they're about the kids or about therapy. Anything else, my assistant will route to the void. That's insulting, Lila hissed. It's a boundary, I said. They feel similar when you've never had one. My father stood because the men in my family always stand when they think volume requires height. We took you in. We gave you the minimum, I replied, soft as the Pacific. You gave me the minimum and called it magnanimity. Ada gave me belief and didn't send me a bill. Silence again, the kind that makes your ears ring. I walked them to the door, which is a courtesy and also a metaphor. My mother paused on the threshold. "You look like her when you're angry," she said, meaning Ada. "Good," I said. It kept me alive. Lila lingered, her hand on Maya's shoulder. "I am proud of you," she said, barely audible. "I always have been." I didn't know how to say it without feeling small. "Try practice," I suggested, and closed the door. When it clicked shut, I slid down it like a girl in a movie who's used up all her dramatic tricks, and I cried, ugly, grateful tears that smelled like salt and tasted like a new language. Then I called the person who had been teaching me that language for a decade. "Are you home?" I asked. "I could use a hug." "Doors open," Mina said. "Tea's on." "I'm already in my car. There's a particular quiet your house learns after it's host to ghosts." The eucalyptus along my drive sounded like paper. The ocean took the long way to shore. When I sank onto the bench under Ada's pepper tree, it felt like sitting in a pew. Mina arrived the way she does everything, on time, with intention. She tucked herself beside me and said nothing until I did, which is a skill more people should cultivate. "They asked for money," I said, after the story had sprawled between us like laundry. "They asked for shares. They said family like it was a password I'd forgotten." "And you didn't give them what they came for," Mina said, not a question, but an observation. "I gave the kids futures," I said. "And I gave the adults a mirror." "And yourself?" she asked. I looked out at the haze line where blue met bluer and thought of the 10-year-old who didn't get a song. "I gave her back her voice," I said. Mina slipped an arm through mine. "Approval is a habit," she murmured. "Breaking it hurts, like any other addiction. You did something hard today. Your body will shake. Let it." I let it. I shook until laughter arrived, which is how grief often leaves. 2 days later, I filed papers for a foundation I'd been thinking about in scribbles for years and suddenly understood in whole sentences. The Ada Rowan Trust would fund exactly the kind of safety nets that keep kids like me from kneeling for the people who say, "Be grateful." Not just scholarships for tuition, though those matter. Therapy stipends because language saves lives. Legal advocacy for adoptees whose guardians forget that guardianship is a verb, not a badge. Microgrants for 20-somethings aging out of systems not designed to hold them, because rent doesn't care that your mother prefers her Christmas photos without you in them. I seeded it with 50 million because numbers like that make people in suits nod and because I could. I staffed it with people who'd lived the ache, not just studied it. I put the bench under the pepper tree on the letterhead because every mission needs a place to sit and remember why it matters. It changed me faster than any market ever did. I stopped pretending that competence was a substitute for intimacy. I allowed my executive team to see me eat noodles at my desk like the mortal I am. I left the office at a reasonable hour twice a week even when IPO numbers begged me to stay. Because there were 14-year-olds in community centers who needed to hear a woman in sneakers with a badge that said CEO tell them they could be in charge of more than their own survival. I invited my first 2 employees over on a Thursday and made pasta from scratch, and we burned the first batch and fed it to the crows and started over, which felt like a sermon. Jordan, the grad student I'd shared a crumbling apartment with back when the only thing I owned of value was a secondhand chair, showed up with violets in a pot and a story about her students reading code like poetry. Evan sent a text with a photo of the first check he'd written me framed above his desk. "Best ROI of my life," he wrote, and I cried again. I also did something small that would have looked petty if anyone had seen me doing it. I took down the last 3 photos in my house that had people in them who no longer earned a frame and replaced them with children's drawings, the ones from kids the trust had helped, all crooked hearts and crooked houses and stick figure scientists with wild hair. The gallery wall suddenly made sense. I met Lila and the kids at a park in Brentwood one Saturday because boundaries don't mean walls, they mean doors with locks. She didn't bring up money. I didn't bring up the email. We watched Maya hang upside down from the monkey bars like gravity was a suggestion, and Theo spend 20 minutes examining an anthill with the focus of a surgeon. "He's you," Lila said, and smiled like the sentence didn't cost her anything. We could become people who spoke kindly. I decided to let that be true. My parents sent a note 6 months later. Not an apology, exactly. Those are muscles some people never learn to engage. but they acknowledged that their ask had been inappropriate. They said they were proud, even though I suspect pride is not the word for what at last they felt. They asked if we might see one another next Thanksgiving. "I host in Malibu now," I wrote back. "It's loud and messy, and there's always too much pie. We go around the table and say what we're learning, not what we're thankful for, because gratitude is weaponized in families like ours. You're welcome if you can play by those rules." They said they'd think about it. It felt like growth that didn't need my management. A year after the doorbell, I threw a party that wasn't a gala, no press releases, no donors, no steps and repeat, and filled my home with the people who chose me before there was any glory in it. Mina's kids cannonballed into my pool and ate strawberries with both hands. Evan told the story about the time I answered his diligence question with a fully functioning demo I'd built on a napkin and a dare. Jordan read a poem that made me feel like the locket at my throat had been whispering to me all along the words I finally could hear. We watched the sun turn the ocean into hammered metal, and somewhere behind us someone started a song that wasn't Happy Birthday, but felt like it could fix the part of me that still ached for the one I hadn't gotten. Late, when the house hummed with the last of the laughter and the dishwasher clicked its contented animal noise, I walked out to Ada's bench and sat. The pepper tree threw lace on the ground. The locket caught the porch light and flashed green like approval from someone whose opinion is the only one that ever mattered. Kin isn't chemistry. It's constancy. Family is breakfast someone remembers to make the way you like it without being asked. It's the colleague who says, "I've got this, go home." It's the 9-year-old who sends a postcard that says, "Dear Ms. Aria, I got in pencil because ink is too brave." It's the mentor who leaves a chair open at her table with your name on it and never once asks you to earn it. My parents will always be the origin story. They don't have to be the destination. If the doorbell rings again, I'll answer it the way I did this time, calm and careful, with my boundaries dressed in their Sunday best. I won't give away pieces of myself I can never get back. I will, however, keep carving doors for the children born into houses without enough love in them. I'll keep funding the futures that don't require anyone to kneel. Somewhere, a girl is turning 10 in a kitchen that smells like blue frosting. Somebody is telling her to get in the car because her brother has a game and the world doesn't move for her party. If I do my job right, that girl will grow up and buy her own cake and invite the right people and sing to herself off-key if she has to. And she won't need anyone's permission to call it a celebration. Have you ever had to build your own definition of family when the one you were handed didn't fit? What did your first boundary sound like when you finally said it out loud? Tell me in the comments, I read them. And if this story put a steadier beat in your chest, tap like and subscribe. There are more of us than you think, and none of us has to do this alone.